Hi, welcome to the Beyond Burnout panel. We're going to have a webinar discussion with these three wonderful medical experts, these doctors who have joined us today. Super excited. So we'll get started in just a minute. Gigi says hello. Hey, Gigi. Thanks for being here. I was laughing with everybody before we got started. My internet and my mobile hotspot literally went out at 3 o'clock. So I'm doing this from my phone, which is a new experience. So, it's like this is what burnout is all about. This is what business ownership is all about, rolling with the punches. All right, so I'm going to go ahead, and I know Gigi's coming in from Charlotte, from the Charlotte area as well. Gigi, Jonathan is actually a provider in the Novant network, as well as being an author. So we'll get into that for a minute, but Gigi will get that reference. All right, everyone. So welcome to this webinar. It's going to be fantastic. As we talk, if you have questions that you want to ask, put them in chat. I will do my absolute best to get to them with the setup that I've got going on today. And I'm going to go ahead and introduce everyone, and then we'll jump right into the questions. So with us today, first off, I have Dr. Tamora Beckford, MD. Dr. Beckford is a board-certified emergency medicine physician, an author, speaker, and CEO of You Are Caring Docs. She helps companies keep talent and reduce burnout through wellness training. Dr. Beckford has been featured in Forbes, Yahoo Finance, and LinkedIn News. She hosts a podcast in the top 3% of shows worldwide, has appeared as an expert on over 80 podcasts about wellness, burnout, and stress management, and is a sought-after speaker. Tamara has also co-authored 2 best-selling books, Made for More and Thriving After Burnout. So Tamara, welcome. We're super excited to have you today.
Thank you guys for having me.
Awesome. All right, next up is Dr. Jonathan Fisher, MD. Dr. Fisher is a cardiologist who focuses on healing the heart in the broadest sense, encompassing both the physical and emotional aspects of cardiac care. He is the author of Just One Heart, a cardiologist's guide to healing, health, and happiness. Educated at Harvard and Mount Sinai, Dr. Fisher has designed programs for an organization with 38,000 team members, reducing stress and enhancing well-being. He has delivered keynotes, workshops, and retreats for organizations globally across various industries. His mission is to help others train the mind and heal the heart. Jonathan, welcome to the show today. I'm super excited to have you here.
Thank you, Julie. Great to be with you and Tamara and Michael.
Awesome. All right, and then finally we have Dr. Michael Foti, D.O. Mess that up a little bit. Dr. Michael Foti, D.O. Michael is a clinical assistant professor of internal medicine at Touro University and is the author of Grief, A Doctor's Battle with Anxiety and Depression. He is also the vice president of the National Alliance of Mental Illness of Orange County, New York, and serves on the board of directors for the New York State Osteopathic Medical Society. Having received overwhelmingly positive feedback from sharing his own struggles with mental health, Michael is a motivated medical educator who is passionate about raising awareness regarding mental health in the medical community, especially in medical student education at the curricular and policy level. So Michael, thank you for being here today as well.
Thanks for having me. So happy to be with everyone.
Yeah. So I just want to kind of lay the groundwork is why I wanted to bring together 3 medical experts, 3 doctors to talk about business owner burnout. Back in 2021, I had a massive burnout that led me to going to the emergency room, thought I was having a heart attack, turned out to be a panic attack. And the advice that I got from the cardiologist was to do less, to take a break, and set better boundaries. And while I appreciate that advice, I wish that when I was in that position, I had either had more education about how to talk to my doctor and or just maybe have that doctor have a little bit of a better understanding of like what it's like to be a business owner and what the reality is. So, and I understand the place of emergency medicine, but that was my experience. And so this panel has been like 3 years in the making, to be perfectly honest. And I'm really excited to have it. So given that background, I guess, Tamara, I would like to start with you because you're still, you practice emergency medicine still. And I was wondering if you could explain maybe how burnout and entrepreneurs and leaders might manifest or show up differently in other groups. If you've seen that in when you're caring for your patients, and what are some unique stressors that we might need to be aware of as business owners?
That's a great question. And thank you again for having me on. I think when we think about business owners and entrepreneurs, one of the challenge that happens is not being able to turn off whatever it is that you do. So when we think about burnout in its true definition really is associated with career. And it's associated with a job, right? Psychological stressors due to chronic stress coming from your job. The entrepreneur sees themselves as the person and the job all tied in one. So how does one separate that? Right? So that's one of the biggest challenge that happens. Now, the manifestation of burnout, we'll talk about like I call it the 3 Ds of burnout,
Mm-hmm.
depression, depersonalization, and a decreased sense of accomplishment. When we think about that overall, those who are in the entrepreneurial space, they might present similarly to those who aren't in the entrepreneurial space, in that you'll still have the sense of that transition where you're having high levels of anxiety, you're
Mm-hmm.
having periods where you probably no longer want to do the job, which is no longer want to have the company. When you think about it, though, that's your passion. You had this, like, Simon Sinek, that was your why, your
Yeah.
drive, your passion. How do you throw all of that away? And so that might be the presentation from the emotional side. Now,
Got
when
it.
we talk about the physical side of it, you so aptly described some of that, where you might be coming in with symptoms such as chest pain, shortness of breath, waking up in the middle of the night. And, unfortunately, a lot of these things happen in the middle of the night, right?
Yeah.
where,
Yeah.
where you are unable to call your primary care doctors and you're
Mm-hmm.
showing up in the emergency department. So some of those symptoms are similar to those who are not specifically in entrepreneurial spaces,
Mm-hmm.
but those who are entrepreneurs and leaders, these are some of the ways it manifests, and these are some
Yeah.
of the reasons why it manifests that way.
I I usually say you get the sense of you just want to burn it all to the ground. That's why one of the reasons I aptly named my book Burned,
Burnt.
because that's what you feel like you want to do. It feels like what you are, it feels like what you want to do. It's just
Mhm.
all encompassing. So, Jonathan, I'm curious about your take on this. And before you answer, I do want to say, if you're having, like, this is not meant to be medical advice, just a quick disclaimer. Even though these individuals are doctors, this is not meant to be treatment advice for you specifically. So, if you are having anything that worried about, go seek medical care. But I thought it would, be important to have this conversation and just give some people some context around this topic. But yeah, so Jonathan, how do you, when you see entrepreneurs, business owners show up, and when you treat them, do you find that they have any unique stressors or things that are unique to them that sometimes cause burnout?
Yes, I do. So we work in a place where there are a lot of big businesses. I won't name them, and we have some CEOs and people in finance and also solo entrepreneurs. I don't think it matters so much where people are in the company. I think it has to do with a general approach to work and by
Mhm.
extension, a general approach to life. Because just backing up a little bit, when we talk about burnout, for the first decade or two, the conversation was about labeling burnout as an individual's problem. Well, there must be something wrong with you, Julie. If this happened to you,
Mhm.
suck it up,
Yeah.
buttercup, work harder. And that was really the message that I got in my early days when I was having chest pain as I went into the hospital to see a patient who was having heart failure in the middle of the night. I didn't tell anyone about it, but I was having symptoms myself, not just of physical heart symptoms, but of
Mhm.
burnout. And actually, in the whole spectrum, there's what I would call mild, moderate, and severe burnout. And it's important to point out here, and I know Michael will touch on this, that we often miss the conversation around depression and
Mhm.
anxiety. because it's so easy to label nowadays, burnout this and burnout that. And Tamara was alluding to this by saying it's a workplace phenomenon. Now, anybody and everybody is burned out. A teenager's burned out. I
Yeah.
do think it's helpful to keep it in the context of the workplace where it was originally described, using relatively strict criteria, but never to overlook the fact that among, let's say, entrepreneurs, there may be a 5 to 10% rate of depression and anxiety along with the burnout. Because
Yes.
if we focus only on burnout without the mental health piece, we are going to miss some of the treatments. But with that being said, specifically, you asked, how does it show up in people who are in business, entrepreneurs, whether it's in sales? I work with attorneys also, they have different kind of business. Oftentimes, it's an idea of what success means. It relates, so if you ask, I would receive a common answer from all of my business people. Success, well, really, it means leading the industry. It means beating my competitors, so there's competition involved. It means having a certain financial surplus at the end of each year and a certain year-over-year profitability. There are what we call external metrics of success. And for anyone who has burned out, as many of us have, and had to work our way through it, we've studied the science of well-being and human flourishing. And what we learn is that we can't flourish if our ideals, goals, and values are around external sources of validation and reward, which by definition, most entrepreneurs define their lives that way. So to finish the answer, part of the work, the deeper work, and this doesn't necessarily happen in my cardiology clinic, it's more in my coaching work, has to do with examining our identities and our goals in life. And how do we define success? And so it's not just take a break from work. It's who are you as a person? And what does success and what does failure mean? And how do you judge yourself based on that?
Yeah, you got to get outside the how much money's in your bank account and how many employees you have. I think those are, I did that for a long time. It was success was defined by how much money I had and how many employees I was employing. And that just led to an epic burnout. And ever since then, I had that realization of I've got to define success outside of those external things. Like, what does it feel like to be successful for myself is really important.
Beautiful.
So Michael, how about you? Do you have any thoughts on this question about how this shows up and any unique stressors that you've seen?
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with everything that Tamar and
Yeah,
Jonathan said first and
cool.
foremost. I agree that, it was initially approached at the individual level and there was a lot of self-blaming going on. And I very much agree that for everyone experiencing burnout, not just healthcare professionals, but especially those in just high demanding professions, right?
Hmm.
Entrepreneurs obviously being, part of that. There's a systemic issue, and really I call it a systemic failure, right? Because we're not empowering these leaders to feel safe to get the help that they need once it's become a mental health disorder, right?
Hmm.
So, Jonathan was talking about the different severities of burnout, and I loved everything that you said. And I think that once it gets to a point that it is affecting your quality of life, it's affecting your ability to work and also ability to be there for your family, your friends, and be present. Now that's a disorder, right? There's something called the DSM-5
Hmm.
criteria for mental health disorders, and that's usually one of the commonalities is once it's gone to that point, right, that it's affecting quality of life. Um,
Hmm.
so I think that we have to do a lot more for uh, those in these high demand professions so that they feel
Hmm.
safe to get help, right, when it's gotten to that point. And I think that apart from that, to your original question, right, it's that I think that to recognize that burnout, it's to understand that it's not just about they can no longer do the job. Sometimes burnout
Hmm.
manifests as putting yourself more into the job, right? Because
Yeah,
you're trying to distract yourself from
Yes.
yeah.
what's going on, right? Pour yourself more
Hmm.
into the job, right?
Hmm.
And I think that's something how you can recognize, well, this person's burning out because they're pouring themselves so much into this, but they're not really there. They're not present with
Yeah.
what truly makes them unique.
Yeah, it's really hard to. I think one of the reasons that um, entrepreneurs seem to burn out so spectacularly is we are hesitant to say we have a problem because Jonathan mentioned that, you know, it's kind of, there's this overriding theme of, well, you picked this career, so just suck it up. And I'm sure the three of you, having gone through various medical schools, you could probably relate to that, thinking at times where you were like, why did I pick this route? Because there, you know, a lot of these high performance and professions are really hard. And then you also have that the guilt of, well, this is the lane you chose, so you have to figure out how to drive in it. And it's true, but it's also doesn't mean you should be driving with flat tires or, you know, running out of gas while you're driving that lane, because it's hard. So Michael, I want to ask you, start with you with the next question. And this is the part that I think is really important. It's I want to make sure we have space to talk about like how entrepreneurs can communicate more effectively with their care providers to make sure that they are addressing whatever is causing the burnout, whether they need something for, you know, depression, anxiety, ADHD, whatever it is, or if they just need, you know, to have a conversation with somebody they can be vulnerable with. So what questions should or would you love if, you know, entrepreneurs would ask, if you were in the seat of treating an entrepreneur, what questions would you like for them to bring to the table to make sure that they are advocating for themselves to get the treatments that they need for burnout and stress?
Yeah, well, I'll tell you something, and this comes from my personal,
Mhm.
you know, experiences as well. I would applaud anyone, any entrepreneur that just shows up to that doctor's office, right? That's that first step.
Mhm.
It's the most important thing that you can do.
Mhm.
Is because there's so many people who unfortunately don't take that step and they take a different step, then that's, you know, so that's first and foremost. And then just recognizing that they may not know what's going on, right? They may not know that this is
Mhm.
burnout. They may think they're just stressed. They may not know, and they may very well later on be diagnosed with depression or anxiety, right? Or both, right?
Mhm.
So they may not know what's going on. All I'd want
Mhm.
them to recognize is something's going on, right?
Yeah.
You know, and obviously any provider would exclude any, you know, metabolic or
Mhm.
physical causes of the symptoms, make sure
Mhm.
that's not a cause, and then really just show them that, you know, we're there for you and we're going to try to, you know, really get you the help you need. Once you've excluded those other things, then they really need to meet with someone and, like you mentioned, be vulnerable, right? So they're going to have to meet
Mhm.
with someone and really get vulnerable and figure out the root cause of that, right? So
Mhm.
um sitting down and meeting with that person, and then it also involves a lot of introspection, right? To figure
Mhm.
out um and sit with themselves and see what's really going on, and I think that's the important step they'll need to take.
Yeah. So Jonathan, how about you? What do you wish, you know, entrepreneurs and leaders when they're in this state, obviously coming to the doctor is the first, you know, one of the first steps. And I recognize you are a specialist, so you probably don't see these people until later on. But um, what questions do you wish that they would show up with, or just information that they would show up with to help you treat them more effectively and get them on the right path?
I want us to get the message out there that our current approach to our health and well-being is disjointed and broken and is leading us in the wrong direction.
Yes.
So if someone, if they know that they have an emotional challenge or a psychological challenge, they go to the psychologist. If they know that they have a spiritual problem, they'll go to the priest or the imam or go talk to the rabbi. If they know that they, you know, have some other problem, like a physical heart problem, they'll go and talk to the heart doctor, but just about the heart, the physical heart. And what we're seeing now is billions of dollars wasted by entrepreneurs and by our healthcare system in having people go to the wrong people, wrong places, and talk about the wrong things and miss the root cause of 80% of the diseases that people have, which has to do with chronic and repetitive stress, which often shows up in the workplace as burnout. So what I'd like people to first do before they come to the doctor, I'd like entrepreneurs to educate themselves about health and wellness and well-being. And that should be in 101 business school. I don't think it is right now. I don't think it is. And I'd like the bottom line to be redefined so that it's no longer about dollars and cents, but it's about how long and how well and how much joy and how much love will you have in your life? Because no one's going to count the number of employees you had when you're dead. No one is going to celebrate that. And so I'd like every entrepreneur really to take a step back and to look at life in a broad context and ask, what does it mean to have one precious human life and to live it well? And then once they've done that learning and they'll understand that you can't just go to the gym and squeeze it in like most entrepreneurs do in a 15-minute time block with a personal trainer that they're paying thousands of dollars for, and then maybe someone else cooks their food and expect that you're going to have a healthy heart, because you're not. Stress and burnout bring so many people into my office, which is why I'm obsessed with the fact that our emotions, whether it's stress, anger, frustration, and cynicism, many emotions that successful business leaders carry with them, creates many risk factors leading to heart disease, stroke, diabetes, and death.
Yeah. I wonder sometimes if, when I think about when I go to my primary care doctor, he knows what I do. So he'll ask me, how's it going? And I'm always excited about what I have going on at work. So I talk about work, but I wonder if doctors were trained to say, how is work going? No, really, how is it going? If we would get to more of this, because I feel like, when you go to your doctor, it's like, what's the urgent thing? Like, do you have a cold, or are you having heart palpitations? Like, what's the problem right in that minute? And they treat that, but it's hard for them to get past. And I understand there's so many challenges. The healthcare system is, it's a mess. And there's just so many challenges to get beyond that first, like, you're here for this. Your insurance will only pay me to treat you for this. So we're going to focus on figuring out what this thing is, and then we got to let it go and hope you're okay. So sometimes I think if doctors would just ask, how's work? No, really, how is work? Just ask that twice. So Tamara, I'm curious, what do you see, what would you like for entrepreneurs when they come in with like a stress related diagnosis, questions to have when they show up, or even just information that they need? Like, what stuff are you looking for in the ER?
So when most of my patients are coming to the ER, they're not at that point diagnosed with the stress related, and they're at the first phase of dealing with some of these symptoms. What I have been in practice doing and is really asking, a lot of times patients come in and they'll say, let's say I'm having chest pain. And, I'll ask, okay, other than asking the standard questions that we do in medicine to investigate, then I'll ask, well, what do you think is causing this? Because a lot of the answers are within the patients. So they're more than likely are going to sit and start to tell me, well, they have this particular thing going on. And then that's when I'll find out, like, that person's an entrepreneur, or they're a business owner, or they're in charge of XYZ, because that's not part of my paperwork. I don't get all of that information. I get the person that's coming in saying this. So when I truly go in and I'll ask them, so you tell me, so is there anything that you can think of that might be causing this? And this is a question I ask all of the patients. And you'll start to get the answer. And that leads to what Jonathan and Michael says, where you start getting that introspection. And so before I even finish that, what we call the encounter, which is that meeting with that patient, a lot of it starts to unravel, saying, oh, well, I have been having a lot of stressors, either that person or their partner, and says, well, we do have a company and we just had to, the information starts to unravel. And then now we're able to dive deep and recognize, okay, this is related to workplace. And so not to say that your chest pain is not from a cardiac standpoint, because I always explain, my job here as an emergency medicine doctor is to make sure that all the worst things aren't happening. But once we've ruled that out, this is something that one should think about. So what I would love for a lot of our patients who go to the emergency department, at that point, you're in a high level of stress, no matter what, right? You don't show up to the ER to have coffee with me.
Yeah.
But I think it's important for those who are entrepreneurs to make it known to the doctor at that
Yeah.
point, somewhere during the conversation, to say,
Mhm.
yeah, I am a business owner and XYZ. And not that, and for our colleagues who are in the ER, most of my colleagues I know will not or should not blow this off and think that, oh, this information is just related or your issues related to
Yeah.
stress. But having that as a part of what's going on helps us to give a broader picture as to what's going on in that person's life.
So I'm just curious. This is a random question.
Mhm.
Um, how just raise your hand if you feel like when someone's long-term partner or spouse, somebody who's been, a significant other for a while, is it helpful when they come to appointments? Because when my partner
100%.
goes, they're like, no, you need to tell them. My wife will say, no, you need to tell her about what happened. Tell her
Yes.
about what happened.
Yes. As a matter of fact, we look at the person, the patient. We'll
Uh-huh.
ask the question looking at the patient, and then I look at the partner for the answer because the patient.
So first step to the business owners listening is, as much as you don't want to, when you're having these types of doctor's appointments, take your partner with you, because they're gonna tell the truth if you won't, and a lot of, and I say that jokingly, but a lot of the times, like I know, we're very burnout aware here because I've written a book about it, but before then, my wife would go to sick visits with me and say, "You've been really stressed out. You've been working, 12 hours a day, 16 hours a day. You've been, falling asleep face down on the couch. Like, these are real things that I didn't even notice I was doing, and then they become just how I was coping with stuff. And it literally took me getting sick and then taking my partner to the doctor with me for some of those things to surface. So we'd laugh about it, but in all seriousness, having somebody who sees it happening with you is can be very helpful. So, well, great. So, Jonathan, I'm going to start this next question with you. Much like I did, a lot of business owners, and this is not just my story. I've had a lot of business owners tell me this kind of story when they have something going on in their body. It ultimately ended up to be burnout. All of the doctors they saw were saying things like do less and take a vacation. Um, not just like anxiety and panic attack type stuff. One of my friends, her arm didn't work. Like her right arm was messed up for 2 years, out to be from stress. And it took her to figure that out in a bunch of doctor's appointments. But what do you think are maybe one or two strategies that do less and take a vacation? Great advice, but probably not the most realistic advice in the moment for a business owner. What are some strategies that you might recommend business owners doing, after they leave your care, that they could implement right
Mm.
away?
Yeah, I'm hearing behind the question, Julie, a desire for more empathy from healthcare providers, if I'm reading
Mm-hmm.
into that correctly. The way that,
Yeah.
you were met with certain answers that didn't quite meet your needs. And I
Yeah.
just want to acknowledge that for a moment and say that I'm
Mm-hmm.
sorry that that happened, because it really had a lingering kind of impact. And also
Mm-hmm.
acknowledge that those of us on this call are interested in helping shift or nudge our
Mm-hmm.
healthcare system to bring more
Mm-hmm.
empathy, which doesn't require special training. It just requires
Yeah.
remembering who we are and creating workplace environments for us so
Mm.
that we can deploy our full empathy in each and every moment and never give what may feel like a dismissive answer, which is what it sounds like
Mm-hmm.
you got. So with
Yeah.
that as a background, I find it helpful, when Dr. Beckford has somebody who has an emergency, there's different levels, right? There's broken bones, and then there's just a scrape on the knee. And so the advice will really depend on how severe the burnout is. So I
Mm-hmm.
will I will just say that if I see someone who's coming to me with chest
Mm-hmm.
pain, high blood
Mm-hmm.
pressure, abnormal heart rhythms, all resulting from burnout, I
Mm-hmm.
will, in fact, diagnose that as a severe burnout. And
Mm.
I'm going to need a team to help me in that moment. So
Mm-hmm.
before I get to any quick tips or tricks, what I'm
Yeah.
rejecting is the idea that a
Got
doctor
it.
who's responsible is going to be there to give you tips and tricks. And in fact, I have an allergic reaction to people on the internet and influencers and
Yeah.
anybody who's offering tips and tricks to deal
Yeah.
with what are fundamentally deeply
Hmm.
rooted human conditions that require
Hmm.
complex approaches. So that's my general approach. And
Yeah.
I'm a real world kind of a guy, and so I
Yeah.
will offer some tips. So the first one is, if we are in severe burnout, I want that person's employer to know what's going on. Now, entrepreneurs are often self-employed, so it's even
Hmm.
better. I'm talking to the
Hmm.
employer in front of me, and I will
Hmm.
give instructions, a prescription, and we'll talk
Hmm.
about work hours, we'll talk about sleep
Hmm.
hours, and I'll put it in very scientific physiologic terms. The body needs a certain amount of sleep each night. How much are you, as the CEO of this company, allowing your employee, which is you, to sleep each night?
Hmm.
And then I'll get answers,
Hmm.
and it could be 3 hours, 4 hours, 5 hours. And
Hmm.
and then I try to read the room and see, is this person in
Hmm.
front of me interested in scientific facts, or are they more kind of
Yeah.
like a feelsy kind of a person? And if they're more of
Yeah.
a feelsy person, then I may actually literally practice and teach them the power of a deep breath, activating the
Hmm.
vagus nerve. I may teach them 1 minute of mindfulness practice. I may even have them hold their own heart, feel their heart beating in their hands so they can feel the stress. And then I can spend a minute teaching them the practice called self-compassion, which
Hmm.
many entrepreneurs don't deploy. In fact,
Yes.
they're so used to being aggressive and sometimes even domineering as a way of doing business that they forget there's a whole other way that you can sell with heart, you can do business with heart, you can lead with empathy. And I teach people that that's another way to treat their hearts.
Yeah. It's, you said so many things. One thing I want to point out, and then I'll go to you, Michael. But Jonathan, what you said about uh, compassion, so many entrepreneurs have no compassion for themselves. And that I think is a big part of the problem that we deal with is that we expect so much of ourselves. And eventually, if you don't have if you don't have compassion for yourself, that trickles down to everybody who's working for you and your clients and all of that, which can implode your business. But that's another webinar. So thanks for that. So Michael, how about you? What are, you know, so I won't say tips and tricks, but just anything that you offer people who are in your care when they come to you that they can maybe practice right away, something they can do right away while maybe you're helping them get set up with that team, get set up with that psychiatrist, or making sure their primary care doctor knows what's going on so that they can take over the care. What are some things that you can offer um, in that moment of time to help people in burnout?
Yeah, so I think I love what Jonathan said about self-compassion, and I think it does start there. You know, it is about really taking care of yourself, right? And it obviously very much depends on the severity of the burnout. I
Hmm.
talk about this in my book where when I needed to take care of myself, I took a medical leave from my job
Hmm.
and I put in the work on me, right? I saw a
Hmm.
psychologist every week. I put in tireless hours on myself to figure out what was going on and get to the root cause. Like Jonathan said, this is complex and unique to the individual, right? And
Hmm.
so I really needed to take the time to take care of myself. I'd been taking care of others for so long. So to that
Hmm.
person, to that entrepreneur, I would say, you've been taking care of this business for so long, this is your passion, but now you need to take care of yourself, right? And you mentioned what could someone do before they're set up with the psychologist, for example.
Hmm.
Um, I wouldn't say so much like you mentioned where you were told do less, take a vacation per se.
Hmm.
I would say, and this was told to me, spend time being present doing or being with those that you love or doing something that you love, right? So
Hmm.
that isn't taking a vacation per se, really. Maybe it is for
Hmm.
someone traveling, but um for me it was spending time with my family. Now, I
Yeah.
always spend time with my family, but I wasn't there, right? I wasn't
Yeah.
present. So I needed to be
Hmm.
present with my family, really be there. And so I would say for what that is for that person, whether it is spending time with your family or friends or traveling or just reading a book or whatever it is, right? You need to spend
Hmm.
time doing what you love. Get back to you. I tell my students all the
Hmm.
time, we all very much have a unique part of us, right?
Hmm.
A unique part
Hmm.
of our soul. I talk about this a lot where I'm more than a doctor, right? Being a doctor is
Hmm.
what I do. It's not who I am,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
So being an entrepreneur, yes, you may love it very much and you're
Hmm.
very passionate about it, but it's what you do, it's not who you are. There's so much more to you. You know, you may be a wife, a husband, a father, a mother, a writer, a poet, a musician. You know, I have a student who's a published author, and she asked me, "What do I do when I become a doctor? Can I continue this?" And I said, "Please continue this." Right?
Hmm.
This is a very
Yeah.
unique and special part of you, right? So you have to nourish that part of your soul outside of your profession because it makes you who you are, and then you bring that uniqueness to those around you.
Yeah. So Tamara, how about your thoughts on this?
I completely agree with my colleagues. And the thing that we even talked about earlier about being an entrepreneur is that that becomes that person's identity overall. And as
Hmm.
Michael is saying, and so that person is unable to separate themselves from that identity. But one of the things that happens through that progression as you're an entrepreneur is that you start to merge and then you start to lose certain parts of yourself along the way.
Hmm.
I see that in your face,
Hmm.
Julie.
Hmm. Yeah.
So I always like to tell people to go back to that inner 7-year-old. And I use the number 7 instinctively because I remember at 7, you're older than just the toddler phase. You're starting to begin to understand life. You have a little bit of independence, but not too much. And that's where you have this part of your mind where you can create and do anything. You're part
Hmm.
superhero, part person, But as life continues, we beat that out of you. Oh, you're too old to think like that anymore. You're
Yeah.
too this. But that was a time of a lot of freedom. And that's when we had what now as adult we'll look back and say like those were hobbies, but those were just parts of things that we loved to do. So
Hmm.
find that inner person, find what it is that that person loved doing before it got beat out of them into whatever role that you feel like you had to play as an adult. And I use that in quotes because we know we all become adults and play no longer becomes part of our lives. And so if you can find some of that, that's when you start bringing back some of the joy.
Hmm.
And bringing back some of the joy will bring back some of the different things like the gratitude. Bringing back some of the gratitude will bring back some of the mindfulness. And then once you're able to now separate that, then you'll start to get some of the ways to reduce the external factors that could have, brought on some of this burnout.
Got it. Yeah. So I 7 years old is a great age because it's also before you start getting into like the teenage, the
Teenage.
tween and the teenage angst and the drama. And then, every teenager I've ever met feels like the end of the world is happening because,
Absolutely.
they couldn't use their phone anymore or whatever. So, yeah, that's a great point. I always try to, um, I love to just put on some tunes and belt out Celine Dion. Like she's my go-to stress buster. I can't sing,
Yes.
so but it's still fun to do. And
Mhm.
then just make sure you're laughing. That's one thing for me. I actually, when I went through my burnout, I redefined success as one part of success is just making sure I'm laughing every day. Usually
Mhm.
it's with my spouse, but sometimes it's with a bunch of other people. And just if I've done that, I usually feel pretty good about the day. So, well, listen, we have a wrap time at 4:15. So I want to make sure that the three of you have an opportunity to let's first share any like final thoughts about burnout and entrepreneurship, and then also where people can find you, the best way to reach out to you. And I know you all have books, so this would be a great time to share that as well. So, Jonathan, why don't we go ahead and start with you on that?
Hmm. Yeah, for me, it comes back to making sure we're connected with what's most important in our lives. And
Mhm.
Hmm.
often looking at burnout not as a disease or even a condition, but as useful information that something somewhere along the line got disconnected from the way things either used to be or were meant to be. And that we're not
Hmm.
nurturing ourselves, we're not nurturing our relationships with others. And I really believe it comes down to that. Now, when we're working in a larger workplace, it's much more complicated. Larger
Mhm.
systems have many more leaders, managers. We have entrepreneurs and intrapreneurs, and we have policies that are in place that often don't align with our own personal values. And that's where we have to call on a whole battery of inner resources in order to work through burnout. So yeah, mindfulness is useful if you're feeling stressed or confused. You can use some cognitive behavioral therapy. But if you really want to solve burnout at scale, which is, I think, what many of us are also interested in doing, so that the entrepreneurs maybe have an example in the healthcare system. Well, here's how healthcare dealt with burnout once they took it seriously, which I would say began around 2017 when our Surgeon General started to speak about it. So I think it comes back to empathy and compassion. It comes back to basic human needs. And when we are burned out, something is off. And it's not a sign of shame. It's nothing we should judge ourselves or others for. We should use it as useful information, like any good entrepreneur, and say, okay, how can I be agile? How can I solve for this so that it doesn't happen to anyone else ever again? For me, I spent 15 years dealing with anxiety, burnout, and depression, hiding it from my colleagues in the medical field, seeing 3,000 patients a year. And it took me a long time before I asked for help. And so I spent the last 2.5 years researching and writing what for me was the solution. And now for 40,000 other people, I've introduced these ideas at scale. It's called Just One Heart. And it's reminding us that we have to look after our emotional health, not just the physical heart, the emotional heart, the spiritual heart, and the social heart. So, and people can find it just by Googling Just One Heart. So justoneheartbook.com, you'll find everything you need to know.
Great. Michael, how about you? Final thoughts and just where people can reach out to you.
Yeah, be kind to yourself. I tell this to everyone, tell this to my students, I tell it to my colleagues. We're often too hard on ourselves, and you got to just show yourself some love and take care of yourself. It's you are the most important. So that would definitely be my piece of advice. And you can find me on LinkedIn. And my book, Grief, A Doctor's Battle with Anxiety and Depression, which I'm hoping my story will continue to shed light on mental health in our community and try to empower others to get the help that they need. I don't want anyone to suffer in silence like I did. So just trying to empower others to get that help.
Great. Thank you. And Tamara, go ahead. How any final thoughts and the best way for people to find you?
Absolutely. I would say for entrepreneurs, one of the challenge that might occur and will go forefront in your mind once you're getting deeper into that state is that for you will start to retract from others. Remember that what you're feeling, it's not you alone. Your mind will want to tell you that you're the only one going through this. And that's why we're here doing this episode here to really let you know reaching out is so important. So try not to silo yourself. Being around like-minded people, it's important. Be around other entrepreneurs because then it'll normalize what you're going through. Because it's so important that you recognize that there are others who have gone through that. They've come up with great ways that they've been able to get through that part of the journey. And, it's a journey. It's not a destination.
Yeah.
So reach out to others so you can get through that portion of the journey as well. And ironically, for a lot of physicians, a lot of us, our way for battling some of let's say burnout, pardon me, was entrepreneurship, and that we became authors. And my colleagues here,
yes, I noticed that. I was like, okay. So Tamara, where's the best place for people to find you and reach out?
You can definitely find me on LinkedIn. That's one of the places where I put out a lot of content. And our book, Made for More, was there with me and a lot of physician entrepreneurs. You can also find me on my website, yourcaringdocs.com, URCARINGDOCS.com.
All right. Well, I just want to thank all three of our panelists today. It was a fantastic discussion, a much needed discussion. I have a lot more questions that we didn't get a chance to get to, so maybe at some point we'll do another one of these. But thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule. And for those of you who came and attended, I hope you got something out of it and now have a better understanding of how burnout for entrepreneurs actually works in the medical field when you go into the doctor. So I am Julie B. My book is Burned, How Business Owners Can Overcome Burnout and Feel Success. And if you're here, you probably already know how to contact me, but I'm also on LinkedIn. But yeah, thank you so much. And we'll just go ahead and wrap it up. It was great talking with you, and it was a great webinar. Thanks, guys.
Thanks for
Bye.
having me.
Thank you.
See you.